You know that feeling when the world just flips upside down, and everything you thought you knew dissolves into a fog of betrayal? That was me, standing in the middle of the campus quad on a crisp October afternoon, the leaves swirling around my feet like a chaotic whirlpool of all the emotions I was struggling to process. The sun was bright, casting long shadows across the brick paths, but all I could see was the silhouette of him, Ryan, laughter spilling from his lips as he surrounded himself with his new friends, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. I can still feel the weight of the betrayal sinking into my chest, a thick, suffocating fog that wrapped around my heart. Just a few weeks prior, I had been his world. We shared everything: late-night study sessions in cramped dorm rooms, coffee breaks between classes filled with dreams and plans. I was the girl he told his friends about, the one he promised he would never hurt. But promises are fragile, and trust, well, it can shatter in an instant. It started innocently enough. I had noticed the little things, the way he seemed distracted, the way his laughter didn't reach his eyes anymore. I brushed them off, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. But then the texts came, too frequent and too intimate, and in one suffocating moment, my heart shattered when I discovered he'd been with someone else, right under my nose. Her name was Sarah, another student in our sociology class, someone who looked exactly like the girls I had always felt insecure about. I was furious, heartbroken, and most importantly, filled with a desperate need for retribution. The moment I saw them together, standing too close, whispering in a way that felt intimate, something dark coiled within me. I could feel the rage boiling, simmering under the surface, waiting for any excuse to bubble up. I should have walked away, confronted him, or even just cried it out with friends over a tub of ice cream. But deep down, I knew I needed something else, a plan. I wanted him to feel the fear that I felt, to understand just how it felt to be hunted and haunted by what he had done. And so, as I watched him laugh, clueless and carefree, the gears started turning in my mind. What if I made him think he was being watched? What if I became the ghost in his life, the shadow that lingered just out of sight? I wanted to see the worry in his eyes, the confusion. I wanted him to realize that his actions had consequences. It was a twisted, dark idea, but one that consumed me entirely, pushing me deeper into a world of his own making. Little did he know, I was about to become the phantom of his nightmares. The thrill of the unknown, that intoxicating rush of revenge, began to seep into my veins. I was no longer just the heartbroken girl, I was the architect of his fear. And as I turned to leave the quad, blending into the crowd of students who were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. I spent the next few days lurking in the shadows, carefully plotting my every move. Each moment was a mix of exhilaration and anxiety, as my heart raced with the thrill of the game I was about to play. I watched him from a distance, noting his routines, who he hung out with, and the places he frequented. It felt a little like a scene from a movie, where the villain is carefully orchestrating their grand plan, all while maintaining an innocent facade. Only, in this case, I was both the villain and the victim, the lines of right and wrong blurred in the haze of my anger. One day, as I followed him from class to the library, a wave of doubt washed over me. Was I really going through with this? Did I really want to sink to this level? But the memory of his laughter with her, the way he looked at me with that cold indifference, was enough to push me forward. I had to remind him of what he lost, to resurrect the ghost of our relationship that he had so carelessly discarded. I waited until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with colors that mirrored my tumultuous emotions. The campus transformed under the evening lights, shadows creeping out from alleyways and corners, making it the perfect backdrop for my revenge. I donned dark clothing, blending into the night like a vengeful spirit. This was my moment to strike. The first night involved simple distractions, moving his backpack a few feet from where he left it, placing an ominous note written in hastily scrawled letters on a bench he frequently sat on. "You're not alone." It was vague enough to keep him guessing, but pointed enough to spark unease. I watched from a distance, my heart hammering as I observed Ryan's confusion turn to anxiety as he found the note. The way his brow furrowed and his eyes darted around was intoxicating. I felt a twisted sense of power surge through me as he looked around, as if searching for an answer in the dark, just like I had been searching for answers after discovering his betrayal. For days, I escalated my tactics. I left more notes, sketchy reminders of my presence. I would hide in nearby bushes, watching as he jumped every time a gust of wind rustled the leaves. I'd occasionally bump into him, acting like a bystander, forcing a smile while I reveled in his discomfort. Even the smallest twitch in his demeanor felt like a victory to me. But it wasn't just fun and games, it was also deeply unsettling. The line between reality and my revenge had become fuzzy. I replayed every moment of our relationship in my mind, scrutinizing every sweet memory while reminding myself of the betrayal. The emotional push and pull was exhausting. I would lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with my conscience. Was I becoming the monster he had made of me? As the weeks wore on, the thrill of my plan began to fade into something darker. I could see the toll this was taking on him. His carefree laughter had been replaced with a nervous, furrowed brow, and it struck me that I had turned him into a shadow of the person I once loved. I found myself questioning my own motives. Was this revenge or merely an act of desperation to regain some semblance of control in my life after he had shattered my heart? One evening, as I watched him from a distance, I caught sight of him with his new friends, the same ones he had laughed with so easily when all was right in his world. Now, they were scanning the area with worried expressions, whispering among themselves about the strange occurrences surrounding Ryan. A chill swept through me as I observed the anxiety etched on their faces. It was a moment of clarity, one that struck like a bolt of lightning. I was no longer merely playing a game of revenge, I was responsible for instilling fear, a feeling I had so desperately fought against when I discovered his betrayal. In my twisted sense of justice, I had relinquished my own humanity. The thrill of seeing Ryan jump at shadows and glance nervously over his shoulder began to feel like a poison coursing through my veins, tainting the satisfaction I once sought. There I was, cloaked in darkness, but instead of feeling powerful, I felt hollow, the joy of my revenge fading like the dying light of the day. The humiliation hit hard when I overheard one of Ryan's friends mention how worried they were about him. "He doesn't even want to be alone anymore," she said, her voice laced with genuine concern. Suddenly, I felt sick. I had successfully turned him into a prisoner of his own mind, a shell of the guy I used to know, and it gnawed at me. I wanted him to feel the pain of betrayal, yes, but I never wanted to ruin his life. That night, as I lay in my darkened room, the shadows felt different, heavier. They were no longer filled with the electric thrill of my plan but weighed down by the guilt and doubt I was now grappling with. I tossed and turned, my mind repeating the mantra, "This isn't who I am." I could hear the echoes of my friends' laughter, feel their warmth, and I suddenly longed for that connection again. Instead, I was isolating myself, pushing everyone away while I dwelled in this dark space of retaliation. The following day, I decided to change my tactics. I hoped maybe I could find some balance, alleviate the torment I was inflicting. I left a note for him, one that felt like a glimpse of my fractured self: "You don't have to be afraid." It was cryptic, yes, but meant to convey that I was done playing games. I didn't want to terrorize him, I just wanted him to understand the weight of what he had done. But when I saw him receive the note, trembling hands, eyes wide with confusion and fear, I realized I had underestimated his response. As he read the words, he looked around, searching for answers, relief spilling over into the worried expressions of his friends who had begun to gather around him. They whispered, glancing at me, and for the first time, I felt myself being pulled back into the shadow of my own creation, a mere spectator to the chaos I had unleashed. As the days passed, I noticed something darker brewing inside me. The lines I had tried to navigate became grotesquely blurred. I suffered from sleepless nights, riddled with guilt, yet I continued my charade. I couldn't bring myself to face Ryan directly, terrified he'd see the truth in my eyes, the anguish behind the mask I wore. Instead, I slipped further into my role as his specter, haunting him with a chilling presence that kept him unsettled. Then came a moment that would shatter the fragile composure I had clung to. I overheard Ryan talking to Sarah, his voice strained. "I can't take this anymore. I feel like I'm being hunted," he said, his voice breaking, revealing a vulnerability I hadn't anticipated. My heart sank, a deep ache seeping into my chest. I had become the very thing I had loathed. It was humiliating to realize that the very pleasure I had drawn from the fear I instilled in him had transformed into a sickening weight inside me. I stood against the wall, hidden in the shadows of a nearby building, my heart racing as I listened to him pour out his soul to Sarah, who seemed as perplexed as I felt. She was trying to comfort him, but all I could think was, "What have I done?" "I was just trying to get back at you," I whispered under my breath, as if that could somehow absolve me of the darkness consuming my actions. It felt surreal, listening to my ex-boyfriend, the one I had loved so deeply, voice his turmoil, yet here I was, the source of that turmoil, his phantom, his unseen tormentor. As I leaned against the rough brick wall, the chill of the evening air slipped under my skin, amplifying my sense of unease. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back in that moment of betrayal, the piercing realization of his unfaithfulness flooding back with a vengeance. But instead of fueling my anger, it ignited something else, a deep, gnawing regret. I had been hurt, yes, but I had crossed an unforgivable line. I was not just a heartbroken girl anymore, I was a puppet master tugging on the strings of someone else's life, and I was losing control. Watching Ryan break down in front of Sarah, a girl I had once been jealous of, set off a chain reaction of emotions. The initial thrill of revenge was replaced by a pit in my stomach. This wasn't justice, this was cruelty. As he leaned against a tree, shoulders trembling, it hit me like a wave, the final straw had come crashing down. I was not just ruining his life, I was also dismantling my own sense of self in the process. What was I doing? Who had I become? The anger that had been my fuel now felt like poison, suffocating the remnants of my former self. I realized that I didn't want him to suffer endlessly, I wanted him to understand the pain he had caused me, to recognize the gravity of his actions, not to be trapped in a web of anxiety that I had spun. And there it was, the turning point, the moment I decided I needed to end this charade. I watched as Ryan wiped tears from his eyes, frustration bubbling up as he confronted the source of his fears, the ghost I had created. The sight of him like this was like a dagger twisting in my heart. I wanted to scream out, to tell him it was me all along, to confess that I had orchestrated this nightmare. But the fear of revealing myself and the shame of my actions paralyzed me. Staring into the abyss of his despair, I felt a profound sense of compassion transform the bitterness I clung to. I had to take responsibility for my actions, to break this cycle of revenge that had morphed into a cruel game. Instead of lurking in the shadows, it was time to emerge, to confront the mess I had made and reclaim my identity. That night, I didn't leave a note or follow him from class. Instead, I sat alone in my room, wrestling with the duality of my existence, between the heartbroken girl desperate for closure and the vengeful specter I had become. I needed to find a way to let go, to forgive him for what he had done, but more importantly, to forgive myself. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about what had once brought us together, the laughter, the shared dreams, the love we had for one another. It was those memories that now felt like distant echoes, a reminder of the person I used to be before the betrayal consumed me. I needed to create a plan, but this time, it wouldn't be about revenge, it would be about closure. The revenge plan, a path toward healing one, anonymity and revelation, I decided that if I wanted to end this cycle, I had to reveal my identity, but in a way that allowed me to step back from the vengeful persona I had adopted. I would write him a heartfelt letter, sharing my feelings of betrayal and hurt, and explaining how my actions stemmed from that pain. I would leave the letter in a place he frequented, like the library desk where we used to study together, ensuring he found it unexpectedly. 2. A confrontation. After he read the letter, I planned to confront him. Not in a hostile way, but as someone who wanted to talk and find closure. I knew this wouldn't be easy, and I anticipated that he might be defensive or even angry. I wanted him to see the real consequences of his actions, but more importantly, I wanted us to discuss the hurt and betrayal we had both experienced. 3. A new beginning. I recognized that healing could only come from understanding. So, in that confrontation, I would suggest that we meet for coffee, an innocent setting where we could both express ourselves honestly. I would tell him that I was ready to move on, but first, we needed to address the chaos I had inflicted on him. 4. Genuine apology. This part would be crucial. I had to apologize for the revenge I had enacted. I needed to acknowledge that while his actions hurt me deeply, what I had done in return was unhealthy and wrong. I planned to let him know that my intent was never to ruin his life, it was simply to make him understand that actions have consequences. I hoped this would lead to a moment of honesty, where Ryan could express his regret for cheating and we could both find some semblance of closure. 5. Setting boundaries. After our conversation, I would set clear boundaries for myself and for him. I had to make it clear that I wouldn't be lingering in his life as a haunting presence anymore. I wanted to reclaim my own happiness and encourage him to do the same, so I would suggest we take time apart, focusing on ourselves. This was about healing and moving forward, even if it meant doing so separately. 6. The final note. The last step would involve a final note where I declared my intention to step away completely from his life. I would document everything I had learned from this experience, how I had lost sight of who I was in my desire for revenge, and how I now recognized the importance of self-respect and healing. I wanted him to know that while I might not be in his life anymore, I wished him well and hoped he could grow from this experience. The obstacles ahead. But even as I mapped out this new plan, doubt lingered. Would Ryan understand my intentions? What if my confession led to anger instead of understanding? Would he even feel remorse for how he treated me or see me as just another ghost from his past? I was terrified of the vulnerability this new plan required. Sharing my true feelings meant opening myself up to the possibility of more hurt, but I knew I had to take the risk. I also had to consider his emotional state. If he was still grappling with the fear I had instilled in him, how would he react to my letter? Would he find it unsettling or enlightening? Questions swirled in my mind like the autumn leaves outside my window, drifting aimlessly without resolution. But I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was done with this shadowy existence. It was time to step into the light, to face the consequences of my actions with courage. The confrontation. The day came. I sat in a small cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee swirling around me, a contrast to the knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I could see through the window as students passed by, laughter filling the air, a world I felt so distant from. With each minute that ticked by, my resolve wavered. Would he show up? Would he even want to talk to me after everything? And then, he walked through the door. The moment our eyes met, a wave of emotions flooded over me. Ryan looked different, more haggard, shadows under his eyes betraying the sleepless nights he had endured. But there was also a flicker of determination on his face. He walked over, tension crackling in the air between us. "Hey?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Hey?" I gestured to the empty seat across from me, my heart racing as he sat down. Silence enveloped us like a thick fog. We both opened our mouths to speak, only to close them again. The moment stretched, heavy with unsaid words. I could see the apprehension in his eyes, the way his fingers fidgeted with the hem of his hoodie. I knew he was still haunted, still afraid. Finally, I broke the silence, words tumbling out in a mix of urgency and fear. "I wrote you a letter." I reached into my bag and pulled it out, sliding it across the table. "I think you should read it." His brow furrowed as he picked it up, hesitating, eyes darting from the note to my face. There was a flicker of recognition, of curiosity. He opened the letter, his expression shifting as he read my words, each sentence a fragment of my heart laid bare, each confession a piece of my soul exposed. "I wanted you to understand," I continued, my voice shaky yet resolute. "When I found out about you and Sarah, I was devastated. I felt betrayed, lost. I didn't know how to cope or how to make sense of my feelings. So, I lashed out in a terrible way." He looked up, pain etched across his features, and I could see the moment the realization hit him. "That was you?" he asked, the tremor in his voice betraying a mix of fear and disbelief. I nodded. "I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted you to feel what I felt. But instead, I became the person I hated." His eyes softened, and for the first time, I could see vulnerability in him that mirrored my own. His shoulders slumped slightly, and the tension in the air began to dissipate. "I'm sorry," he said, almost too quietly. "I never wanted to hurt you. I messed up, and I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think about you." The words hung between us, heavy with the weight of our shared pain. My breath caught in my throat, and the realization that we both had been victims of our own choices hung in the air like a thick fog. "I don't want to be angry anymore," I confessed. "I don't want this to define us. I want us both to heal." As I spoke, I felt a strange sense of liberation wash over me. The chains of anger and vengeance I had wrapped around myself for weeks began to loosen, breaking under the weight of our shared vulnerability. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for Ryan, but for me as well. Ryan looked down at the table, a mix of emotions playing across his face, regret, shame, and a hint of relief. "I never meant for things to end up this way," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I messed up, and I thought losing you was the worst thing that could happen. But this, what you did, it scared me in a way I never expected. I felt like I was being hunted, and now I can see how that was your pain mirrored back at me. I deserve that fear for what I did to you." As he spoke, I felt the knot in my stomach loosen further. This was the conversation I had longed for but had never imagined would happen this way. Two broken souls, sitting across from each other, each striving for understanding amidst the carnage our actions had created. "I don't want you to feel like you're being hunted anymore," I said softly. "I know that fear. I've lived with it. But I'm here now, and I want us both to be free. Not from each other, but from this." I gestured between us, the unresolved tension and hurt that had clung to our past like a dark cloud. Ryan nodded, his expression softening as he took in my words. "I never wanted to lose you. You were my safe place, and I destroyed that. I wanted to feel something different, but I didn't realize how much I valued what we had until it was gone." His honesty struck a chord deep within me. I had wanted him to suffer, but hearing him admit his mistakes, witnessing his vulnerability, shifted something inside me. I was tired of carrying the weight of revenge. It was exhausting, and in that moment, I could see that forgiveness could be the most empowering form of closure for both of us. We talked for hours, unraveling the complex web of emotions that had ensnared us both. Conversations flowed freely as we aired our grievances, our fears, and our regrets. I learned about the pressure he faced, the overwhelming expectations at home, and the way he had sought escape in the wrong places. He learned about the darkness I had spiraled into, the loss of self amidst the chaos of betrayal. The moment felt cathartic, almost healing. As we shared our thoughts, I felt the burden of resentment begin to lift. Maybe revenge wasn't the answer, maybe it was empathy and understanding. I could see his struggle reflected in my own, and it became clear that neither of us was beyond redemption. When the sun began to set, casting warm hues of orange and pink across the sky, I felt a sense of finality settle over us. It was time to put the past behind us. I reached across the table, and he met my hand with a tentative touch. "Thank you for being honest with me," he said, his voice earnest. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but it means everything that you're willing to move forward." "I'm not doing this for you," I replied, my heart pounding with sincerity. "I'm doing it for myself. I want to reclaim my life, my happiness. And I hope you can do the same." In that moment, something shifted. We weren't just ex-lovers caught in a web of betrayal anymore, we were two individuals seeking closure and understanding.